Seeing the presence of a quorum, I'm calling to order this meeting of the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee at what looks to be around 6:43. Apologize for the delay in organizing, but here we are.
And seeing a quorum for Union 26, call the meeting to order at 6:43 p.m.
Okay, and the first item of business is approval of the minutes of November 11, 2017. How many people had a chance to take a look at the minutes? Are there any adjustments to it?
I move to approve the minutes of November 11th.
Is it really 11th, or is it?
It was just going to point, yeah, there's a discrepancy. 14th is the right
November
date.
14th.
Yeah.
Okay, so the minutes are actually correct.
The minutes have to be, because 2 weeks ago would be the 14th.
Great. Can I second?
What's the motion again?
To approve the minutes of November 14th.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Now, there we go. Any edits, additions, changes? All those in favor of approval of the minutes of November 14th, 2017, signify by raising aye. They are approved by the Regional Committee.
And for Union 26, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of November 14th?
So moved?
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Oops, sorry.
All those in favor? Thank you.
I believe my discussion would have been out of order. I'm not part of Union 26. Okay, so now I am declaring the need to enter executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, pursuant to Purpose 2, to conduct strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, specifically Michael Morris. And I declare the need to enter into executive session to do so. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. I guess we'll take a roll call
No, we're
vote.
coming back though, right? You gotta-
Oh, I'm sorry, and we will be returning to the meeting for the rest of our agenda happily and enthusiastically following that executive session.
Oh, well then Sullivan, aye.
Menino, aye.
Demling, aye.
Ordonez, aye.
Marriott, aye.
Nakajima, aye.
Hazard eye.
Tuamini, Cage, aye.
Okay, the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee is in executive session.
And for Union 26, intent to call to order and enter executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law, Massachusetts General Law 30A, Section 21A, pursuant to Purpose 2, to conduct strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, Dr. Michael Morris, and we will not be returning to open session following executive session. Can I get a second?
Second.
And then we will do a roll call vote, and we'll start from here.
Menino, aye.
Demling, aye.
Ordonez, aye.
Marriott, aye.
Hazard eye.
And we are now in executive session. Thank you. A bit harder.
Reconvening this meeting of the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee at 7:48. Our first item of business is announcements and public comments. Just scheduled for 48 minutes ago, but that's life. If there's anyone who would like to come forward and offer a public comment, you're limited to 3 minutes. Please identify yourself to the microphone, to the audience, and address your comments to the committee and the chair. Sullivan's just tricking me. You're not making a public. Okay, seeing none, public comments are closed. Are there announcements from the committee? Really? Hope you all had a nice weekend. That's good. Yes.
I would just like to take this opportunity to really embarrass the chair of a regional school committee
really?
with a happy birthday,
Oh.
Mr. Nakajima.
Well, it really did nothing.
How does it feel to be 30?
You know, I could tell you all about it, a whole year of it. Yeah, life is good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I could think
Thank
of
you.
no place. Somebody earlier today wrote to me on Facebook and said, I hope you are gathering warmly and well and happily with many close friends this evening. And I wrote back, I said, well, in fact, I'm going to be chairing a regional school committee this evening. And they unfortunately, they live in town. So if they were many miles away, they would have been like, oh, that's so interesting. You have a lot of close friends and family on the school committee? Here, they just sort of laughed. And I promise you, it's a pleasant place to be, and I couldn't think of any place I'd rather be.
Thank you.
No other comments, I hope? So subcommittee updates, just as a reminder, especially given our late hour, if you don't have an update or a comment, you can actually just pass. You don't need to have a long conversation about why you should have a committee or how you feel about it or something like that. And actually, do we still not have an Amherst Media Liaison from this committee? Where's Vera? So many kids.
I'm on the Amherst
You are?
Media
Okay, so it's the collaborative
Board.
that's still one where we don't have
from the regional.
from the region. Okay. Will you have anything for Amherst Media?
Sure, it's Giving Tuesday, so Amherst Media is a nonprofit that is also participating in Giving Tuesday, so folks can donate towards the capital campaign for the building.
Audit did not meet. Budget, we have other budget-related topics later, but we didn't meet. Contract negotiating team, any updated comments, or you can pass?
We don't have any other updates.
Okay.
Still
Nope.
meeting.
Still meeting.
Data Trends Subcommittee hasn't met, so nothing there. Policy Subcommittee?
We did meet.
Yeah, we met a week from yesterday and continue to work on the policy around Union 26, which I think is already moved on to Amherst. And then we talked about school council's policy, and I think we'll continue to work on that next, maybe in a time after next time we're meeting with Ms. Cunningham. She has policies that she's recommending that we take a look at. We'll work with those.
Can I just add that there was a question about whether the Union 26 policy should come before the regional school committee, and we felt that it should actually go before all three, because it does talk about the regional committee as well, so that at some point will be coming here, after it's been reviewed by both other committees.
Cool. That is a wicked cool update. Speaking of wicked cool, Recreation Working Group.
Did not meet.
Okay. Regional Assessment Working Group is an item later on the agenda. School Equity Task Force.
No new updates.
Okay. CPAC.
Did we have a meeting since the last meeting? No.
Not since last.
No, okay.
Okay. And an item, by the way, was postponed from tonight, so we're looking forward at either December 12th or, do you know what our January meeting is?
I can tell you in a minute.
To put this item back on the agenda then.
Mr. Duffy, well, Dr. Marsh is looking that up.
Yeah.
Just a comment that was made to me, in our future agendas, if we could have subcommittee updates, maybe parentheses optional added. A couple of people saw the first time we listed these out saying,
Yeah.
whoa, there's going to be a lot of updates at the subcommittee,
Yeah.
and didn't realize that there weren't going to be full-on, huge breaking news from all of these different areas.
Well, and it's
So
funny you
these-
say that, because if you notice tonight, I started this section of the agenda by begging people to realize that these are optional.
Yeah.
So in fact, for future purposes,
Right.
I agree with you entirely. Not only does this like look scary and unwieldy, but on top of that, I think it puts, like, even though the normative pressure was we really want to make sure we're updating each other on what we're doing, which is a totally awesome outcome of the retreat, the idea that would move to the idea that everyone has to think up something to say for 10 minutes every meeting is like totally crazy and non-productive and probably alienating to the public, as you were suggesting. Mr. Dunlap. Yes.
16th of January.
So at the latest, the 16th of January, we would have the CPAC item that's on here. Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee.
We actually met yesterday. We took a look at the school equity task force recommendations for goal setting and had some discussion about that. And I don't think, we're still working on how to incorporate all that together. And I think we're kind of also waiting for the superintendent's contract to be official so we can move forward.
No, yeah, so, and we also started to try to make some inroads into getting input about how we might address this issue of who completes the evaluation,
Yeah.
incoming, outgoing members. So I actually spoke to Mr. Kuchar yesterday briefly, and so I'm trying to get some resources from him, and he actually had quite a lot of thoughts about it. So we're looking for some examples, and we are thinking that it might be worth this superintendent evaluation subcommittee taking some time to create some possible protocols around this that we might bring back to the committee. That's sort of where we are with it, but we'd also like to have some examples if we can find examples of how other districts address this around.
I think that's great. One thing I'd bring up that I was thinking about the other day is, at least in Amherst, there's going to be like an election season opening up soon. And not to sound funny about this, but just to be publicly transparent, the closer you get to election day, the more people who are involved as candidates start feeling very proprietary and personal about the thing they're about to do or the thing they're hoping they're going to do. And so, if at all possible, and I realize for the other towns, these elections happen a little later, unless they're not happening tonight, that it would be awesome to come up with concepts to approve so far in advance of any elections that no one ever perceives that. I mean, forgive me for saying this. We talked about this a lot at the retreat. We talked about this before the retreat. Everybody knows, and the public should know, that this conundrum of how you fill out the evaluations and who fills out the evaluations isn't actually personal to any member's current, past, or present, or future on the committee. It's really about setting up a process that feels fair to all involved and is functional. But I'm just saying the reality of human behavior is that the closer we get to all of that occurring, the more people who are running are going to feel like they have a stake in the decision. And it'd be great to make a decision that's fair, reasonable, and good, that's well in advance of that. That's my 2 cents.
I think that's a good recommendation, and we can sort of put that, be on track to have something to bring before the committee.
Cool. Collaborative. I know we don't have a representative here, but still, is anything cooking that we should know?
No.
Cool. Superintendent.
Sure, I'll be brief given the time. So just as a reminder, and I think we've spoken about this before, but next Thursday on December 7th, we're hosting a screening of a film that hopefully people are able, if they're around, to attend. I think it'll be kind of educationally, I started screening it last night because we actually got the film in, which is very exciting. But it's also a partnership with both the Amherst College Careers and Education, but more relevant perhaps with both our local teachers association, the Amherst Pelham Teacher Education Association, as well as the Massachusetts Teacher Association. So it's a really nice synthesis of people concerned about privatization in public education. And there's going to be a panel afterwards with Jean Fay, who's our local president and a paraeducator at Crocker Farm, the president of the statewide Teachers Education Association, and then a parent and MTA board member, Max Page. So it's 7 o'clock next Thursday. Everyone's invited, and I think it'll be a good educational experience and also just a nice way to support our Teachers Association as well. Just briefly, Alana Cabinet, which we talked more about last year, but the group has met, the full group has met twice. It's a larger group. We had more interest this year, which was a very positive thing from my perspective. And the group's decided to focus on 2 areas: developing a culture that's fully supportive of staff, and then also professional development around social justice and equity across the district. And so now the members are choosing kind of one focus area that was a group decision to be more intentional and not necessarily have the group, 12 or 13 people, which can be cumbersome, as you all know, to make decisions. So breaking that up to where people's passions lie, and we are actively working on that and getting the lists and off and running, and it's been fantastic to work with that group again. And it's a different group, right? Some people knew, some people stayed, some people did not come back or did not choose to come back, but that's been going well. I'm going to skip facilities director because Ms. Cunningham's going to talk about that. I think actually in the name of time, I'm going to skip a couple of these. Summit Academy, I think worth saying, they had a lovely Thanksgiving. They have an annual celebration, and students did musical numbers. Ms. Cunningham was there, as well as some other people who are, actually I think most people who are here, who are staff, went over to see. And just a particularly special thing that can happen in an environment like that is staff members got up and said what they're thankful for every single student in the school, because it's a small enough school where that's able to happen. And it was really personal and meaningful. It wasn't like, oh, Eric, you're great, or happy birthday, right? It wasn't that kind of, it's a nice thing, but it was very specific and showed the kind of deep relationships that can happen in that environment. It was really nice to see. My last one I'll speak to is the 410 meeting, just as a reminder, 9 o'clock upstairs in the middle school in the library on Saturday. I think given the meeting that some of us just had, and also the financial picture for next year, I think if people are able, it's a really important meeting to have, and kind of as has been discussed in the past. Emily doesn't know this yet, but I'm going to ask Emily and Eric to sit up with the finance director and myself and have a larger role, because we really want to promote that this isn't just a staff thing, this is about the school committee as well. So I know some people may have commitments, some of you have emailed me, but I just wanted to remind people of that. And Ms. Cunningham's going to talk a bit about the facilities director.
So we're close to finally hiring the facilities director. We had about 15 candidates who applied, and we screened about 9 of them. We had a team of both the town and school members. We had union reps, it's a very diverse team. We had custodians, we had everyone who was interested came and spoke and said, I'd like to apply. And they also contributed questions for the facilities director interview. So we do have a finalist. Prior to him meeting with Mike and Paul, he met with the people that he would possibly be working with so that they can get a feel for him. Because if they said no, then we'd have to go back and start all over. But they were overwhelmingly agreeable to us offering this person the position. So I've reached out, we've done his reference check, and we're just waiting to have all the other things come together, like his query and fingerprints and such.
Thank you.
Yep, great, thank you.
So that's a super big deal.
It is.
And that's it?
That is.
Any questions? Seeing none, I'm waiving the chair's report. New and continuing business, as I mentioned earlier, item 1 is going to be postponed. Item 2, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Human Resources update. I assume that the Assistant Superintendent is on deck here.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I can scroll, if that's helpful. If you want to, I mean, you could, just because the mic has to pick up your voice.
You can stand there, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, I was hired for this great role, and I'm pleased and ready to present as to what we've been doing so far since we started July 1st. Now, the whole department has been restructured. Prior to me starting, we had Kathy, we had Rachel, and we also had Monica Hall doing the diversity piece, and we had Jennifer and we had Damani. And now it's just Jennifer, Damani, and I. And we have Sasha, who helps out, many times when we need that help. So one of the most important things that I felt we needed to do was change our mission and vision statement. So when we looked at who we wanted to be and what our mission was as a department and as a new team, we felt that it was important that we look and say, you know what, we want to be able to respond to the changing needs of our community and our school and our organization, our families, our students. And we wanted to change the look of HR because many people, when they see HR or hear HR, they think, oh, we're in trouble, something bad is going to happen, or we'll only need them when we need to find out about our benefits. So I wanted to change that and make HR more friendly. So part of it was, I said, we changed it to saying that we wanted to create a culture where all employees felt valued, where we're looking to promote diversity and equity, where we're looking to promote respect, and help to foster an environment where people were feeling like they were growing in their job. So the vision for our HR team or HR department basically was to promote new and innovative ideas and just help all the employees to realize their potential. Once again, our team, Damani, Jennifer, and me, and Sasha, at times when we need her help. With that, I'll turn it over to both of my colleagues so that they can explain the rest.
So our goals for the upcoming school year, as you can see listed, we really want our focus to be to really be a resource for our staff members, from our administrators to our faculty members to our paras, custodians, everyone. We want to be an absolute resource to them and be able for them to feel comfortable enough to come into our office and say, okay, I need help with this, and us be able to create a plan and develop a process for them to be successful in what they do. So we have listed here, we want to assist administrators with their hiring process, choosing candidates that are best for their buildings, the licensure process and waivers. We want to make sure that the people who are in front of our kids teaching our kids are prepared and are licensed in the appropriate subjects, and we want to help them through that path, because as we know, it's a little tricky and not easy to navigate always. So we want to be, again, that resource so that they're prepared, they're well prepared to stand in front of our kids and teach them. Build relationships and partnerships with other groups, other organizations outside of our schools to help prepare, again, our staff to be successful in their jobs, and we'll touch upon that a little bit later. Hire and retain high quality and diverse staff. That's another program that we're working with the diverse teacher workforce, which Damani will speak about. Increase the number of persons advancing their careers within ARB. So we have people of value, people who know what they're doing, and we want to be able to just pull that from them, extract what they have it really be in the forefront so that they can be successful and our kids can succeed. And training, we want to train them in diversity and social justice, sensitivity, inclusion, and we'll also be dealing with restorative practices among our own staff members. And so those are just some of the things that we would like to accomplish this year.
Sure. So this is about assisting the administrators, assist with employment of diverse candidates through our application and hiring processes, doing actively searching out through in school spring for talent that's out there that can definitely benefit our district. We also attend many of the interviews that we have for the different positions that are open in our district, and also involved with scheduling interviews. We're being more active in terms of the recruiting, getting out in the community. We just did the Amherst Survival Center Community Career Fair, which is great because it brings a diverse bunch of people from this community here, and just let them know about what we're doing in the district and different positions that are open. And we're also working with colleges and universities to develop some programs for para-educators to become teachers, the para-to-teacher pathway, as well as restorative practices. And so those are some of our new implementations we're going to start off.
Our pathway programs, as we've spoken before, here we have them listed, all the different pathways that we would like to initiate and move forward. The biggest one that we've been working on recently is para-to-teacher pathway with Mount Holyoke College, and we're trying to develop a program with them where our paras can go and get their master's in teaching and also be licensed on the way, because our paras that are currently here are working with our kids. They know our processes in our buildings and our schools. They know what we expect from them as employees. So we really want to be able to build them up so that they're already working with our children, they're already in it every day. We want to build them up so that they can be in front of a classroom and teach our kids also. And these are just different ways, different things we've outlined that we would like to focus on and eventually see come to pass. Everything from our paras to our teachers to administrator, where teachers who might be interested in a more leadership role, have them create their own professional development where they're teaching their colleagues in their areas of content and expertise and how they can navigate that and possibly open up a door that they didn't know that existed that they might be interested in, which is to become an administrator in our district. We want to be able to get our parents in, maybe if they're interested in being paras, because it creates accountability for our children and for them to be part of our schools and to really know what's going on and what's happening and understand from that point of view what we're doing. Custodian to journeyman, a lot of our custodians, when they're hired as a custodian, they may not think about, can I become a journeyman? Can I become a specialist of some sort? And how can we help them achieve that, if that's something that they want to do, which would open up many doors for them in the future. And let's create a cycle with our own high school students. If they're graduating from here and we can, and they're interested in becoming educators, why not have them come back and teach? It's another level of accountability of, let me give back to the community that taught me. And so these are just the different pathways that we're exploring. Relationships and partnerships is another way that we're really also looking to retain our staff. We want to build relationships with them. I know that our Doreen, she goes to the different schools, and I think she goes with Mike as well. They go to the different schools and they just sit and talk and listen mostly to what our staff are saying. changes, ideas, things that they would like to see implemented, and see how we can implement them, see how we can, take what they're saying and create ways for them to feel like they're being listened to, and the ideas that they've brought forward aren't just being tossed away. How can we validate what they're saying? And I think it's really important that we're doing the walkthroughs through the school and saying we value your work, we value your time, and how can we help you further to do what you do with our kids. And we're also working with the Alana group, and I'll let Damani speak on that a little bit more because he's actually on the Alana cabinet.
Yeah, we just had our second meeting for the Alana cabinet, and we are figuring out some pathways to really focus on to create some safe spaces specifically for teachers of color. We can go just talk about different ideas as well as different kind of pathways and where people can get together and know each other from different places, different buildings, and just being like a support system where people can go.
Did you want to touch on diverse teacher workforce?
Oh, yes, yeah, and also the diverse teacher workforce on the previous slide, those different pathways, and that's what we're working with. There's a whole bunch of different stakeholders, whether it be colleges, administrators, paraeducators, superintendents involved with this, and we're diligently working on specifically the para to teacher pathway, which hopefully should kick off by January. And we already did we have a pilot group that we met with a couple months ago, about 12 paraeducators that are interested in going through this pathway to become teachers. A lot of them have various different skills, whether it be a bachelor's or master's, and they just need help in their licensing. So we're here to support that, and just different resources around the region that can benefit that.
Acknowledgement is another way where we want to retain our staff by acknowledging them and recognizing that the work they do. We've recently instituted the ARBS Shining Stars Award, where supervisors get to nominate their staff members, or actually anyone can nominate any staff member, doesn't have to be a supervisor, excuse me. And you can just say why they're awesome at what they do and recognize them. And then there is a Shining Star Committee where we go and we present you with a Shining Star, embarrassingly. We sing, we dance, and we do a little jig for you. And we present you with a Shining Star just to let you know that the work that you're doing is being recognized and we appreciate it. So we've handed out 2 stars already. All right.
2 already, and we have the others that we're doing this week.
We have the others that we're doing this week. And we're also encouraging supervisors especially and administrators to, if there's something positive that you can say about a staff member, write it down so they can be put in their personnel file so they can read it, so they can see and have something tangible that you see what they're doing. It's not going unnoticed. And so we're always encouraging, write a note, write a letter, something that they can see, that they can hold, they know is in their personnel file, that encourages them to continue to do the work that they're doing. And we want to connect staff also with other activities in the community. We've listed a few there, but we want to know how we can be visible also in the community. So not just in the schools, but let the community at large know that we're here as a resource to help and to make sure everyone is successful at what they do. And I'll pass this on to Doreen.
Okay. So in addition to all that you've heard, we have been working with the second-year teachers. The COSBA group was a group of the youngsters at the high school level through the family center. They've been working with us in training or working with the second-year teachers to just talk about social justice and the experiences that they've had while they were students here at ARPS. And they have just been really a team that has opened the eyes of many of these teachers, because they talked about things such as how the teacher has made them feel invisible and how the teacher has made them feel welcomed in the classroom. So here we are with second-year teachers who, they're thinking, oh, I'm new at this and I want to do it right. And so having these students come in and just say, this is what you can do to help us feel really good in your classroom. And it ranged from, going back and reading our IEPs to make sure you understand what we need, what kind of supports we need, to just saying hi and taking an interest in our outside lives and activities that we may do outside of school. We've had the Embrace Race workshop, which took place here. many of our teachers and some of our administrators have gone to the Undoing Racism workshop and have started a PLC to just talk to teachers and other individuals about just racism as a whole and how we can work to, you know, pull that structure apart as much as we can. Some of the other professional developments that we're looking at is something that I like to call teacher's choice. So with teacher's choice, our umbrella would be social justice. And under that umbrella, teachers would have the opportunity to either choose to go and learn more about mental health and how social justice may affect mental health, or how mental health is portrayed through social justice, also through our curriculum, schools as an institution, how do they support or not when it comes to kids and social justice and what we can do. So, you know, through that umbrella, I think some of the Alana staff is looking to help out to plan the workshops. We have others who are saying, you know what, I want to talk about discipline and social justice. So here it goes where we talk about teachers now taking that leadership role and training other teachers. Some of them are reaching out and saying, this is what I'm passionate about. And so we're giving them that opportunity to now say, okay, I'd like to run a workshop on this topic. So through that social justice umbrella, many teachers have now reached out and said, I want to help. And we have, we're working on trying to do this licensure work groups. So as Jen talked about waivers, there are many administrators who need assistance with getting certain things done to be licensed. And there are many teachers who also need help with getting their license. And so we join together the ones who have things in common that they need, and we are trying to get the mentors to help them through the tasks that they need to accomplish. The other thing that's not up here would be where we talked about the restorative practices and circles. So we're finding that, you know, we can easily say, you know, you're terminated for this or you're terminated for whatever reason, but it doesn't solve the problem. So one of the things that we're trying to do is start some kind of restorative circle and mediation and restorative practices for the adults so that they can have some closure with whatever the incidents may be. Sending away the problem doesn't provide the closure that many people are looking for. So we're looking to start circles and do some sensitivity training and, you know, restorative justice groups and things like that. So any questions for us? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manning.
I had a question about the Teacher's Choice Social Justice PD. I'm just wondering who partakes? Do all teachers are going to be participating?
So we have started looking at some dates in the spring. I think sometime in March when we have curriculum day or half day. So we're looking at using those days better and taking that time to train all the staff, including paras, custodians, you know, anyone who comes in contact with our students would be trained.
Just to follow up, would that include bus drivers? I'm just curious.
We haven't gotten to the point where we can figure out yet how to get the bus drivers, but we are looking to get everyone, secretaries, food service workers, everyone trained.
That's great. Thank you.
No, good.
You had your hand up first.
Oh, did I? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you did.
Apologies.
So I heard, I think Mr. Gordon mentioned before about the Survival Center being the career fair that happened there recently and how you were there present to recruit. You know, we've talked a lot about in order to ensure that we have more diversity in our educator and our workforce more generally, that there's, you know, an aspect of retention, which it sounds like you guys are doing an amazing job in instituting all these new programs, but recruiting is also a big piece of that. So I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit more about what some of the efforts are in addition to, or maybe, you know, if that was a star example, that'd be great to know that too, the Career Center. But if there's other things that you're doing like that to recruit teachers of color or just staff of color.
Sure, yeah.
Mind if I just frame it a bit? So I think it's a great question. And before Mr. Gordon answers, I just want to suggest that a big shift is that, as a former principal in the district, what I feel like is different and what Mr. Gordon's going to talk about is how there's real partnership on the recruitment end and all the work that he'll describe that supports an individual principal who posts a vacancy. And what happens at the central office to support what happens at the school. And so I just wanted to make note of that because it is, markedly different than my experience in terms of what happens when a job gets posted. So I just wanted to frame that.
Jump in
I'm
too
sorry.
before Damani does? Just to say, when I first started, a lot of times I would hear principals say, well, we can't find a diverse group of people to apply to our jobs. Through our School Spring platform, Damani is able to go in and actually just pull a pool of diverse candidates and help our principals by giving them that group. And what I have done many times was call them. That personal phone call makes quite a bit of a difference. And I have called them and said, hey, we have this opportunity open. Are you available? Are you interested? And, just that conversation has made a difference to many people because we have received many applications just because of that personal touch. I'll let Damani finish and then I'll jump back in.
Thanks. Along with what Mike and Doreen were saying, that I think we're taking a more active approach in terms of looking what we have in the pools of folks we already interviewed and seeing that it's a good fit for another position that might be available. Like I said, actively recruiting on School Spring and also partnering up with the local universities to attract and recruit talent that we have. I mean, we live in an area where there's multiple colleges and there's plenty of talent that we can recruit from a diverse staff. So I think we're just being more active and more really just specific in terms of what we're going to do, being more out in career fairs, connecting more with the colleges, and just doing more with School Spring, reaching out, and being more involved in the hiring and attending interviews as well.
And so the other part that I'll just add on is that my first name has now become like a verb. So when I go out to the stores and, just anywhere in the public, I'm always reaching out to people, say, hey, are you interested? And so the other day, I won't tell you who, but someone came to me and said, you know what, I did a Doreen today. I saw somebody at the coffee shop and I said, hey, are you interested in applying for? So I'm always just out there looking for people and just reaching out to them. I was at Macy's shopping, and the lady who was helping me, I said, hey, have you ever thought about a career in education? And she came up, she visited Amherst, and she was very interested. So just being able to go out there and talk to different people and just market our school and our district has been very helpful too.
That's great. Thank you very much.
So two separate questions. First, it's just really great to see finally the district have this office at the level that it is, and merged with HR, and so to see all these initiatives kicking off with this kind of enthusiasm is really great to hear. So given all of the different things you have going on, one is I wanted to ask if you've thought about over the long term how you might track different measurements about how well you're doing. I mean, a lot of these things aren't totally quantitative. It's about how people are feeling and culture, but there are some ways to do it, whether it's through surveys or just looking at percent diversity in staff, percent diversity in teachers, and how that changes over time. So that was one question. The other question is, I don't know if you've given any thought to how this ties in with SETF's efforts over the course. I'm not that familiar with SETF in terms of its historical priorities, but in terms of, it seems to be a lot of crossover in terms of the types of things you're working on. So if you had any thoughts about that.
So I'll start with the last one first, and I'll mention that the two things that when I met with the SETF group, that they were, two of the things that I can work on now was with the staff, increasing the amount of diverse staff that we have. And so that's one goal that we as HR have that came from or was part of my responsibility that I noticed that we crossed with SETF. The other part about the social justice piece was another thing that SETF had mentioned to me that they were really interested in making sure that we take that on, as an organization and as a department. And so that's something that we have overlap too with SETF. And, I should be meeting with them next week just to talk more about the goals and see where we can incorporate some of their things that they're interested in us doing with what we're actually doing. And you talked about the first piece was tracking. So yes, we're looking to send out surveys, and we're looking at the numbers of the people who we start with, not just the minorities, because we're looking to make sure that all people feel valued. So we're looking at how many people stay with us, and also the subset of the minorities, how many minorities are staying, and how many are feeling that they are valued. So anecdotally, we're hearing, yes, we're feeling, especially with the Our Shining Star, they're feeling like we're out there just acknowledging them and and that they're being heard, like Jennifer had mentioned, and that their ideas are welcomed and that they're feeling supported. So we are hearing this, and we are tracking the numbers who stay. So I've looked at that, and also another thing that is strange, but I've started tracking was the amount of grievances and complaints that I have. So I'm looking for that number to diminish for next year. So we're tracking and keeping all the, any kind of quantitative information that we can get.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And I kind of want to piggyback on what Mr. Devlin said, because yesterday when I was meeting with the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee, we were looking at the recommendations that had come from the SETF, and we had a lot of conversation about what that might look like as it is integrated into what the district is already doing, and I think that this dovetails obviously, and you're working closely with them as well. But one piece that we were thinking about a lot was how when this work is being done, and I think I think this idea of creating a different kind of culture around HR is really exciting and innovative, and how do we bring that to our community and really educate them about what it is that, because obviously I think this has been expressed many times that this is an area of real priority for our community of all different across the board. How do we educate them about what's happening, both so that there's a sense in the community that these concerns and these priorities are being addressed, and also so that we start to get a reputation as a district that does prioritize this, and that then attracts more people like, oh, this is a district I might want to work in, because they really care about these. They're not just giving lip service to it, but they're really putting their money where their mouth is. So you may not have an answer for that right now, but I think always thinking about how can we get this out there? How can we get this into the public narrative about why our school really is a unique place to work and to learn?
That is something that we are thinking about and working on, and hoping that as Sasha does a lot more of the communications, that we can get it out to the public, and maybe we have another opportunity to sit with Mike at Amherst Media and do another segment. But any ideas would be welcome too.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'm hoping to have us do and schedule out is actually an agenda item that would start from the goals and talk about some of the goals that were brought forward by the SCTF, and then have both a dialogue on the committee around those goals, but also I was hoping to do that with the two of you and anyone else you wanted, so that there could be an interactive conversation about both what the goals are, what our understanding are of them, the thoughts of the committee in terms of adopting them in some way, but I don't want to, I personally, speaking myself, I don't really want to do that outside of the context of a really robust and healthy dialogue with you both and your team about what is currently being done and how these things reflect one another. And then frankly, something I talked about actually at the SCTF joint meeting recently is trying to understand the context of, you're starting here, you started last July, I guess?
Just past July, yes.
Yeah, and then you've been working on it, you have a team and everything. And so my point is that you always starts from someplace. There's always a process of being oriented, understanding your community, developing resources, working with your staff, and then growing and developing initiatives and building them off of what is currently there. And so to me, having an understanding, and my point about this is building off what Ms. Hazard said, yes, that could help the committee, it might be helpful to you in terms of their feedback, but doing it publicly also allows for a broader public understanding and conversation about the full richness of this topic in a way in which I'm hoping it conveys a broad and deep commitment, but also a sense of what are we actually doing and how are we getting there. And just for that context is too, because I think we're probably going to be wrapping up the segment, I just really appreciate from Ms. Ortiz, Mr. Gordon, you, Ms. Cunningham, and Ms. Figueroa, I really appreciate everything you've done to prepare this, present, coming to speak with the committee. I think it's wonderful. And I also really love the fact that I'm confident that Ms. Cunningham could have come here and said all of these things yourself brilliantly. But no, I mean that as praise for you. I don't mean
Thank
that
you.
diminishing anyone else. My point is, I actually really love the fact that you chose a format in which you showcased all the talent you have, and you gave people an opportunity to do that. I just think it speaks well of your leadership, and to me, the kind of spirit that if you want to walk the walk and model an environment in which people want to work and feel rewarded, you make them feel rewarded, you give them a chance.
Thank you.
I just really respect that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. What do we got next? An equally life-affirming and upbeat topic. Regional Assessment Working Group update.
Hello. So I'll start, but Mr. Nakajima and Dr. Morris can weigh in as well because we all just got out of the working group meeting. So we started by just going around the group to see how each town was feeling. At the last meeting, the consultant made a recommendation. The objective for this meeting was to hear back from all 4 towns. They had time to work with their select boards and their finance committees to get their feedback and basically their recommendation for tonight, and they were going to share that with us. So the long and the short of it is that 3 towns support S10 and 1 town does not. They don't support anything other than S4, which is our current method and the one that results in an unfavorable scenario for our assessment. So I have to change my 4-town meeting PowerPoint a little bit a few days ago, but we're going to present sort of the financial picture on Saturday, and we're going to have to do some work basically to come up with, if we do have to go with the S4 model, some sort of phase-in, and you'll see what that looks like as we go further through the budget process, as well as talk about some of the other options. That's not the only option. There's a couple other things we could potentially do, but this committee will have to be heavily involved in sort of giving guidance on what direction you'd like us to go in.
I don't think I have more to add than Smrugana shared.
Movement to S4 would require what % reduction in the school budget?
So it's hard talking about in a percentage. It roughly adds up to about $550,000 more than if we went with S10. So whatever reduction we'd have to make under S10, which is sort of the newer method that we talked about, using the same guidance that we received from the towns under S4, we would have to reduce $500,000 more than S10.
And the total budget is about?
The total budget's about $30 million. 31.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
So, to change this to S10 would require all 4 towns to approve it, correct?
Yeah, so S10 would be a different method in the regional agreement than what we currently have.
Yeah.
So for the first year, if we were going to go with S10, we would need all 4 towns to approve it.
But
after that, it would go to just 3 out of 4. But for the first time using it, all 4 towns would need to agree because it would require an amendment to the regional agreement.
But to remain with S4 would not require all 4 towns?
Nope, to remain with S4, we would just put out a budget, and 3 out of 4 towns would have to approve their assessments.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Mr. Demling, did you ever handle that?
No,
So a short, easy question and a longer, harder question. So what's the deadline where we all have to be done and decided on this?
town meeting.
Was that the short one?
I thought it was easy.
So we
Maybe you
voted-
won't like my second question.
So we vote in March. We get feedback in February. We present the budget in January. So I think along those steps, if you want feedback, I'd say January is really the latest we'd want to change something. If we still want to give legitimate time for feedback and things of that nature, because switching methods will switch what the reductions look like. So you're going to want people to have time to look at that.
So the second harder, maybe this is another question. So in advance of this Four Towns meeting on Saturday, and this is an unfair question, but so how would you summarize what the objection is? If truly we're talking about $550,000 more,
Mm-hmm.
and you know the bloodletting that would be to the budget,
Mm-hmm.
that I presume nobody is cheerleading on. What's the argument? I mean, I know you're representing a view that is not yours.
Sure. Do you want to weigh in first, Mr. McAdoo?
I don't mind.
Okay. Saw your hand go up. So
Yeah, no, I
the
did.
chairs.
Essentially, there were two parts of this answer. In terms of the actual methodologies that were being evaluated, the primary critique, obviously 3 towns generally, I mean, let me step back. It's not as if everyone said, or any individual town said, we found a methodology that we think is like, the Rosetta Stone or the Dead Sea Scrolls or something. It's found somewhere in a cave. It's magical and wonderful, and it's the greatest thing ever, right? All towns were essentially satisficing to a solution and saying, we think this more or less works. So it's not as if anybody's ideologically set in a notion that a given methodology is perfect. With that caveat, 3 of the towns said, look, we can live with this. The 4th town said that they couldn't, or they didn't want to. And their primary objectives were twofold. One, in the course of the evaluation of the different methodologies, S4 was ranked higher than S10, particularly on volatility and reliability. But actually, even in general, I think their number was 62. And then there were a number of others that were ranked 58 on the scoring that were below it. And so sort of they had a principled objection to the notion that the methodology that was deemed overall the soundest wasn't, chosen and recommended to move forward. The second major challenge was over the utilization for a wealth factor of median aggregate income under the belief that, or the understanding from their perspective, that Amherst has such a broad population and substantial population of students that the median household income might be overall set lower than the prevailing income amongst the predominant adult tax-paying population. And so it skews to the advantage of reducing the assessment to Amherst artificially. I'm merely presenting the argument for that town because there was a robust debate about both the validity of that assessment, that argument, as well as also the question of whether or not there were countervailing factors in the methodologies that might actually offset that detriment. Regardless of that, and there might be other few smaller concerns about it, the general point was that this town had a number of committees evaluate, I think Finance and Select Board, evaluate it and come back with the view that they would prefer to remain with the current methodology and that they couldn't support S10, and as a matter of fact, under the current circumstances, don't support a transition plan that could smooth out some of these challenges in terms of this additional $500,000 hit. The further point that was made was that in the debates that occurred in this town that's directly to the north of us, has a Peace Pagoda in it, that, 'cause I don't think that's a secret, that they also felt like they couldn't explain in detail what the negative impact would be of a 1.7% or $500,000 cut to the budget. And I think there were 2 opinions that they were expressing simultaneously. One was the possibility that in fact the cut could be absorbed without significant operational impact. So there was a skepticism that the cut couldn't be absorbed. But also there was just sort of an underlying sort of rational explication that they literally didn't have the information to make the case that the impact upon school services were going to be significant enough that they should look for an alternative pathway, either transition or even an alternative methodology. And so they were seeking clarity around potential budget impact and budget information. I think they were communicating to the group that they were not interested in entertaining an alternative to the default S4. As I look at these things, and I could be wrong, as I look at these things, nothing's ever set until it's set. So I take what they said very seriously. I think it could have potential significant impacts on our budget. I had some comments today about Mr. Mangano and the superintendent providing greater clarity on budgetary impact, so that we can have more of a real-world conversation about what impacts might be, but also potentially to meet their test that they would like to see greater information. But I think there's also the possibility that this could in fact be the formula that we have to live with, which is why I think Mr. Magano was talking about alternatives that he might bring up, including some of the glide transition path for it. The town manager for the town of Amherst expressed his position, or his opinion, his view, informed view, that the budgetary situation in the town of Amherst was sufficiently dire under our current expenditures and revenues that are estimated, that it is not foreseeable that the town of Amherst would be able to increase its assessment to absorb this difficulty, this challenge. So I say that out loud only because if you have one town posing the challenge that we need to default to S4, that's going to change and skew the assessment significantly in terms of the impact for this year's budget over S10. Then it's also worth noting that another town, the one we're sitting in, said that, well, we're not going to be able to absorb it. I think the point is that makes more real the notion that where we land may end up with more substantial cuts. What I'm hoping it leads to is also significant dialogue. It's one of the reasons why in the past, at least last year when we were doing this, we tended to talk in like secret handshakes and code. And I'm trying to reduce the amount of code and increase the amount of clarity, because since this is a matter of public issue and moment for members of all four towns and for our community and for the staff, I think we need to be fair to all parties involved. This has been, as everyone knows, a multi-year argument. And I think to be fair to the great people of a wonderful town with a great fiber optic broadband network to the north of us, you can easily cast stones at any given town at different points in this argument. And if we want to go there, then it goes very unpleasant, it's personal, and it's non-productive. The reality is there's, I think, rational reasons why each town is coming forward with the positions they are. But the question is, how do you get to a budget you can live with? How do you get to a process that's actually going to support our mission in a sustainable way? Apologize for doing that, but I just wanted to lay that out.
No.
And answer the question thoroughly, if you have both any comments.
The only thing I'd add is I think the challenge historically, and there was some discussion about this at multiple meetings that I've been to and electronically, is when we create what's being asked for, there's some concern about morale of staff, there's concern about exodus of students to charter schools, private schools. And so we're going to have to walk that balance of sharing information that the communities are asking for while also trying to support everything you just heard about supporting teachers and our staff as we look in some potentially very difficult budget discussions, let alone even decisions. Just the discussions themselves can be challenging, and something that I've raised before and I'll continue to raise is also about credibility. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about this situation, we're communicating in the way the chair mentioned, accurate information of what the real situation is, not in a way to scare people, but people get the full context of why we're talking about the level of potential budget cuts that we may have to talk about. And it's a very delicate dance.
And the interesting thing about it, Superintendent, is that there was not that I welcome all advice, by the way, but essentially I got unsolicited advice earlier about how to convey the information we received today, and some of it included the hope that I would convey a level of finality to the conversation that I'm not interested in doing. I mean, in the same way that also I think there was at times a healthy and at times an unhealthy conversation about ascribing the sequence of events that lead us here and how leaders from different towns have led those events at different points. And in my personal opinion, it's profoundly unproductive. Everyone I've heard from these towns is coming forward with very sincere, well thought through positions around how to best fund our schools, and there's no reason to demonize anyone. It also doesn't mean, but I also think, frankly, we do ourselves a disservice, and this echoes the point about budgetary impact and walking that fine line. I think we do the public a profound disservice if we're not willing to talk openly and publicly about the various arguments that are going in here, because the public is then left uninformed about the nature of the argument, not on a who says what to whom level, but literally on the underlying substance of what are people discussing and what does it really mean. And I think that's the same point here, is that you have to walk a fine line, Superintendent, Mr. Mangano, but at the same time, we were already planning on having a conversation about budget that started from a place that wasn't particularly positive. And so the idea that we would have that conversation that starts from a place that isn't positive and then throw caution the other direction,
Right.
in terms of unduly masking what at least the transition effects would be, is very challenging. Yes, Ms. Martinez.
So I just wanted to ask, I appreciate the very thorough explanation of everything that's transpired, and I'm very concerned about this, as I'm sure, everyone is here. One thing that I heard was that one of the critiques from this town was that they didn't feel like they received enough clear information about the actual impacts that the budget reduction would have. And so I'm wondering if there is some sort of, how to present that data, and how to present that information in a way that is convincing. And I don't know if this is going to happen during Saturday's meeting, or if it's going to happen, between now and then or at some other point. But it feels like, if that is a barrier in folks, I understand the whole thing about the assessment that was done previous to that. But if that's a barrier and they don't necessarily believe the impact, how do we help them understand the actual impact?
Want to start, or-
So I'll say two things. So we did that once a few years ago, and it didn't turn out to be a very productive exercise, especially at this time of the year. It's very early relative to projecting the budget. It's mid-November. We just did our first round of projections. We're just starting to talk about what the gap looks like. And as I said tonight, the process to identify reductions is not like a quick, I can look at a spreadsheet, say this, this, and this. It's multiple conversations with principals, talking about what are the programmatic impacts of this, how would we run school if we were to eliminate something like this. And to do that to the level we're going to have to do it anyway is going to be a lengthy process. To then go $500,000 more is just going to make it that much longer of a process. So it's not that we're not going to do it. It's that at this point in time, it's very difficult to do that just because we're just starting to have those conversations. So it's something that I think will unfold over the next month, but it's not something we'll have for Saturday just because we could, but it speaks to the credibility piece that Mike was talking about. We could say, what we have told them is that the gap is going to create $500,000 more of reductions. And we did the simple math of how many staff members that would translate to. But we're not going to have sort of like this program or this program. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I think to add to what Mr. Mangano was saying, I think the other piece that's will happen between now and when we get more specific is some of the financial picture we'll be able to share, including on Saturday. And I think that'll round out the picture, at least in a financial sense, of what that means. I do think we have to be communicating, and Mr. Mangano and his department do a great job. All our budget's online. If you want to see what every line in our budget is, it's all there. And I think until we get to the place where we're communicating what the individual cuts are, some people will get the magnitude, but those are people who tend to, let me just back up. So some people will get the magnitude just because of the quantity of these initial projections, and then some people really want to know what's that $500,000 buying. And that's really the process of Mr. Mangano that involves many, many staff people over weeks and months, involves you all giving us feedback and that iterative process. And I think we can move it up a bit, but there's some limitation to making sure that we've thought through all the consequences intended and unintended before we put a budget cut up on a page, and also understanding that's someone who's watching as well. And it's a delicate dance as well about how to make sure that there's some staff who are less identifiable and some that are more. And I think we can do as much as we can to advance that as soon as possible, but my interest is doing it in the most thoughtful way, both for the benefit of the process and the staff and the community, because the last thing we want to do is put up, well, this will equal $550,000, right? And the numbers add up, but we wouldn't actually do it. And we never want to, for the credibility piece, we don't want to get involved in rushing the process where we get feeling uncomfortable presenting that.
One thought I have, and at some point we probably need to move on with the conversation. Although I think it was helpful also because for as many or all of us who are going to be at the 410 meeting on Saturday, it's best for you not to show up and suddenly be like, wow, it's a much more robust conversation I thought was going on. And it's like, you're up to date, you're fully informed, basically you need to know everything that was heard today. And it's also why, by the way, as was mentioned earlier, it's why we had multiple sessions on regional assessment methodology, is because we wanted to get to a point where when we all met together, this committee, even though you hadn't sat through all the meetings, and I sat through, I think, 3 of them, but not all of them, either 3 or 4 of them, I guess, but not all of them, that we're coming into it on more of an equal page. I don't know if you can do this, but I imagine that there are a number of costs that are fixed, essentially. And I think one of the better ways, in my opinion, of modeling without being specific is to start with how much of the budget you can essentially project in a way that's essentially fixed within certain variables, and then see how much you have left of the budget. And my guess is that's already going to lead you to a better, a better, more explicable place about where the cuts could come without having it lean departmentally on this program or that program or this item or that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does, and that's typically what we presented our first round of the January meeting is, we will quantify it in terms of number of staff, but it won't be identifiable in not just staff, but other programs as well, like all those pieces. And so we can think about how to be more explicit about the fixed costs and how that is included, but we try to do that first round, just gives the raw number of how would we get to this dollar amount. And then we get more specific on that next round in February. But I think it's a good thinking about just being more explicit about utilities and things that we don't control. Health insurance is the largest variable, frankly, right now, more than utilities. And retirement costs that we can't tell Hampshire County, like, oh, we're just not going to pay our bill this year, or Eversource. Those things, and being more explicit about where those sit in the budget. That's helpful.
So are there other final thoughts? Otherwise, I want to move on to the agenda. Okay?
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Sean.
Charter school letter vote. This doesn't even say discussion in that. This is vote. I will entertain a motion. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna put people- One of the questions I had, so I was looking earlier for a Word version of this, was to see whether or not the version we have in here, it has been already altered to read as if it's from the Amherst School Committee, or whether it is clearly from the Amherst Regional School Committee.
This one's from Amherst.
This is the final Amherst version.
That's why I apologize. I was bugging Deb Westmoreland earlier for a Word document, because I wanted to go in and just change those words to reflect region, and no. Yes, but I couldn't, it was,
Or whatever.
never mind.
Communication
It was, no,
attempted.
I got it, but it was complicated to do.
Okay.
So the point being is that I would, if people are otherwise happy with this, I would like to take edits or accept edits or be told to edit to reflect the fact that it's the regional committee. You know what I'm saying? I think dropping in regional committee and substituting the membership and reordering it is a mechanical activity that doesn't require a lot of debate. Yes?
I read every word of it today twice. I have no edits.
Okay. Maria?
So there's just one sentence that just, to me, I don't really understand the wording, but
Sure.
it's not necessarily a big deal. I guess it's the third paragraph of the first page, the last sentence, showing growth demand alone by allocating more resources and so forth. Showing growth demand, do you mean demand growth? Or, to me, like, showing growth in
Waiting list?
demand makes sense.
Should I say wait list?
Nitpicky.
Mr. Devlin?
So what this was speaking to was the argument that the charter school makes in their letter to DESE, saying that they're basically presenting their wait list and that they've expanded their wait list and all that. So
Right,
it's,
I understand.
growth demand is like, hey, look, everybody wants to look at this.
Okay, so
demand.
I guess growth demand is just a term that I'm not familiar with.
I mean, I'm not tied to it. I think it was just trying to.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
You could suggest in demand if you want.
Well, that's what sounds nice to me, just because I'm not familiar with that word, but
I don't
again.
think he's gonna fight you on it.
I don't-
I'm not
I
making
don't-
fun.
I don't
of you.
need to fight
I'm
either.
taking I'm not making fun of anything. I'm taking your comment in good. I think it actually makes sense, frankly. I was supposed to say both in demand.
Can I make a motion?
Sure you can.
Okay. I move to approve the letter before us with edits to be added by Mr. Nakajima regarding making this from the regional school committee and associated edits.
Okay, so moved, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, is there debate? Mr. Dunlap.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Nakajima and Ms. Hazard for their edits after the first version. I think it's in a significantly better place. I think it started out pretty good, but I think it's really personally speaking, but no, I think it's excellent. I think it's really well done. I'd also just suggest to the Leverett and Shutesbury school committees to possibly, if they might want to draft their own thing. Doesn't have to be long, but I think the number of school committees that acts on this is significant, so something to consider.
I forwarded them yours.
Yeah, as did I. I forwarded it to Union 28.
Is that your comment, or do you want?
That was my comment.
Okay, you can make another if you want. Anything else? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand signifying aye. It carries unanimously. Thank you.
Do you want me to send you a version that's
I do.
easily editable? for
You know why I do? Because the formatting, otherwise, it has to be reformatted otherwise.
Yes.
So my point is, I would like your version, so then it doesn't need to be reformatted.
Okay. I'll send you that.
And we can turn it into a PDF ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm not being royal. Some
Right.
combination.
You can also turn a PDF into a Word file.
It's a very uninteresting detail of some formatting things that you can only do in PDF, but I'll.
You're suggesting it's more complicated.
Are you suggesting that if you send me a Word version, it can't be? Yes, sir.
So there's a highlight of a couple of the charts on one of the last pages that is literally not possible to do in Word.
Yeah.
And so it must be done in the PDF. Correct.
Are you?
That was the uninteresting
Are
part.
you interested in rocking and rolling and like putting in changes to like there's a regional committee?
Sure, and I'll send it to you.
And then take at the end with the list of names, put the chair obviously at the top, and the vice chair second, and then list the committee?
Yep.
Okay.
Rocking.
Thank you, I appreciate
you.
it. I mean, I'd be happy to do it myself, but I don't have a full version of Adobe. Well, moving on. Strategic planning process update. I want to point out, by the way, we're actually now within 2 minutes of being on schedule.
Rockin'.
So I'll try to keep to that.
That wasn't, a threat or anything. It's just an observation.
None taken. So the first part of the handout you've seen, which is this document that has like the horizontal portrait, landscape document. And the second one, which actually I'm working with Dr. Musad from the collaborative, I wanted to update you and take feedback on, where it says proposed timeline A, communicating about strategic planning, and the back page of that A3, which is the constituent groups. So that's what I'd like to present that Dr. Musad has been working on. So one of the things that he feels is critical is to communicate frequently about the process with the larger community. So we drafted a letter that would hypothetically come from the chair and myself to the community and be translated. There was a couple quick things that we caught that were kind of just more wording updates and taking out Turkish. That's not a common language in our demographic. I sent them that and, on the second page. But it was really just trying to communicate to the community that we are involved in this we will be involved in the strategic planning process. Here's what it looks like, here's what's going to happen, and trying to do it as succinct as we could, which was a challenge, frankly, because there's a lot going on here. And so we both worked on this and we tried to balance the succinctness with also giving enough detail where someone say, oh, that's what they're talking about, because strategic planning means many different things to many different people. The back page, where it says A3, so we actually pulled from the superintendent search last year, the groups that were going to be highlighted by that search process, because we feel like that work was already done about what are the critical groups in our community to access for important things. And so I do think it makes sense to go over them. So one was staff, and we've sort of, Ms. Cunningham and myself already started that process a little bit ahead of where Dr. Musad is, because we've already been to the middle school, high school, and we'll be at Summit Academy tomorrow getting feedback from staff. So that's going to add to that mix. It's not that Dr. Musad wouldn't go, but we didn't want to wait because we felt like the time was right, and we got some great feedback at schools we've been to. The second one, because he is bilingual, he's going to work with the Family Center to try to reach out both within the Family Center, but also within some of the communities in our micro-communities within our larger 4 towns that are less likely to attend school, less likely to come to an event if we call it an event. Bilingual families, particularly Spanish speakers. He's multilingual, but Spanish is the most common first language that's not English of our families and our communities. School councils and PTOs, PGOs, the elementary staff we talked a lot about, and he thought even though this is a secondary project, it's really important feedback to gather from the sending districts, including Leverett and Shutesbury. How are people feeling about sending their kids to the middle school? What are people saying on staff level? How does that work? So even though it's a secondary project, I want to point out that we opted to include the elementary schools, perhaps in a smaller way, but just as a critical resource of what happens when the kids leave, and how do you all feel as staff members? Certainly you as a school committee, the executive board of the APA, which is our teachers association, SETF, Amherst Education Foundation, CPAC. We thought elementary students perhaps not, because this is a secondary focus, but really capturing groups of secondary students to be involved, as well as town officials from all 4 communities. So when we were working on this, we tried to figure out, you can't get everybody, but what are some critical stakeholders who should be involved, and who are critical stakeholders who need different efforts, and that's really not just the ELL families, but we did focus on that, because what we find it, when we try to draw from our wider community, that demographic is the least likely to, even if we have translators, even if we have ways to facilitate communication, they remain the least likely, least comfortable group for the anecdotal feedback we get to come to an event. So really going into the community. So that's really what's new tonight, is both the communication that'll go out, as well as kind of identifying who would be part of focus groups as part of the process.
Question?
Yes.
One, in terms of the groups and the school committees, I wonder if we could give any thought to opening that up to be both inclusive of Leverett and Shutesbury's full school committees, or at least some representation of them. I'm not sure I can commit a lot of time, but there may be other members on my school committee that could commit time to support the visioning of the middle school and high school, so just some thought about that. And then in terms of the letter that's going out, do you have an idea of how who this letter is going to be sent to, like how you're getting your mailing list?
Right, so we haven't totally decided on that, but what we typically do is we do all emails, and then for families who don't offer email addresses, we do paper copies.
Okay, and then again, for Leverett and Shutesbury, do you have a sense of, because and when I talked about this with my school committee, I was like, this is something really important for the parents that have elementary school kids today, because they will be in the school when this becomes a reality. And so they were pretty excited about that, and they're like, but how do we figure out how we can participate?
So my thought on that, and the timing works out, I think, reasonably well, is that the chair, Mr. Sullivan and Ms. Kaczynski know we're planning events in January to both Mr. Jackson, Dr. Bodie, and myself to attend, having an open session at Leverett and Shute, not on the same night, not combined, just to be really clear, different events at the elementary schools, and we were thinking that would be a natural time to both find out about the schools and also for people to share feedback, because what we know is families are really busy, and assuming that there's multiple events about the regional schools that we can expect elementary school families in Shutesbury and Leverett to participate in, just it seemed like an unrealistic expectation. So we were trying to merge the 2 events.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Denley?
I just had just a very general comment. So I'm totally supportive of doing this and, being involved in all that. I just wanted to just sort of put out there very briefly that I am somewhat skeptical about the effectiveness of this kind of thing in terms of time utilization of staff and community for two reasons. Well, it's probably my experience with this in multiple times in other organizations, and the two kind of general problems that these things tend to run into is, one is that it's so broad, it's so, let's re-envision everything, that it's really hard to concretize it, and so for people who are busy in their daily lives to understand, well, what are you actually talking about? It can be difficult. And the other thing is that it's not like we don't have a school district and nobody's doing anything. We're just starting from a whiteboard and say, hey, if you were running a simulation, what would you do to strategize a school? We already have, a school that's in process, and not just people doing things, but people thinking strategically. And even though there isn't some grand thing behind this, our principals, our teachers, our staff, our students, think and act strategically. And so taking this and then merging that with what is already going on, and then not coming to it 3 to 5 years later saying, oh, didn't we do this big re-envision the wheel thing? How did all that go? So again, I'm not trying to throw cold water and say I'm not into it. I'm totally into giving it the college try. It's just that I've seen these kinds of things just sort of peter out and fail in the past, and so I want to succeed.
Oh, you can start.
One thing. I've been given some thought to this question, and also I've been involved in some strategic planning processes before. Actually, I was hired to run one once for a state agency, and the direction I got, which was kind of funny at the beginning, was, dear God, don't start from scratch. There are organizations that have been thinking about regional economic development. They come up with their ideas, they have programs running, they have initiatives and priorities. There's got to be some way, I was directed, there's got to be some way in which you can combine sort of active listening and outreach and engagement and learning new things with integrating it with things that are already happening in a way that not only gets you to action faster, but also doesn't give a signal to people that you don't care about anything that they've been doing up until this point, or that because some of the regime changes, a new superintendent, a new governor, whatever it is, that it suddenly means everyone decides that whatever robust activity occurred 4 years ago is now completely irrelevant. You're going to throw it out. You're going to start over again. So I think one of the challenges that I think is a healthy challenge and a positive challenge is you're not the first person to say this. There's actually some community members, including former school committee members, who have been very articulate and robust in their notion that Mike Morris, or possibly the regional chair, and I'm not picking on ourselves, but it's just we happen to be sitting here talking about wanting to do this, are interested in throwing out everything and reinventing the wheel. And I think if this process results in sort of a reinventing the wheel, throw everything out, start over again notion, then it's a complete failure. Because, for example, that would pretend that everything Ms. Cunningham talked about earlier and her staff talked about earlier is somehow in play to be completely eradicated and redone some other way, right? And that makes absolutely no sense. Why would anyone want to do that? And so it's actually easier to just erase all the boxes and build from scratch, particularly if what you're thinking of doing is a hypothetical exercise that exactly does what you said earlier, is you do it, you feel good about the fact you've done it, you then stick it in a desk drawer somewhere, you occasionally refer to it in annual action plans, maybe. The school committee never meets and talks about how you're progressing on it, the community never sees it again, and then because of all that, because it really was just a desk or whiteboard exercise, 3 to 5 years later, people are like, well, I don't even know if we've ever even done one, we certainly don't follow it, right? And so that's another reason why, I remember forgive me for the small story, but it's actually super majorly relevant. I remember when I was talking about with one of my advisors in grad school about my planning professional project to move a thesis, did a relevancy about a preacher of UC Berkeley's planning department. And when I described what I wanted to do, she said, because I was a planner, training to be a planner by profession, said, oh, you're interested in implementation. Wow, implementation was a big fad back in the 70s. There's a lot of planning literature about how you actually implement the plans you've come up with. And I looked at her astonished, a very wonderful person, very smart, brilliant person. And I looked at tenured faculty member at UC Berkeley, probably pretty smart, pretty accomplished. So I looked at her astonished, like, so everyone in this field isn't curious about how you not only develop a strategic plan worth following, but also how do you build one that you can actually implement? Like, really? That isn't sort of state of the art? So now I'm going to punt to you the hard question. So having set up the notion that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, we do want to incorporate the great things we're doing, and we actually want to follow and try to implement what we're doing and monitor it.
Sure.
What do you think?
So I'll also tell a story, but I think it's relevant, and it's something that, as Ms. Cunningham and I have went to schools, I think it's illustrative of the type of the approach. This isn't Dr. Masad telling me to do it, and we're partnering on this, but when we've went to schools far, and there's no secret, like we're going to go to some schools, but I'm happy if someone's watching at 9, 10 at night, then they'll know the questions we're going to ask. So we ask 4 questions when we go to meet with staff. So the first question is, what gets you to school every day? What do you really enjoy about working here? What are some really meaningful things about your role in the school? The second is, what does the school do really well? What does our district do really well? The third is, what are some challenges that we're facing, that you're facing, that you feel the school, the district is facing? And the fourth are, what are some ideas you have to improve your, what you're doing, what the school's doing, what the district's doing? So there's none of that that's like, it's intentionally not just saying, what should we do differently? It's actually starting from a frame of, there's lots of things that people are doing well. It's super important, very articulate, right? It's essential that we know what our staff feel and what they experience and what they believe are things that are incredible about their school, the district, their work, what's motivational to them, as well as what the challenges are. And I think I use that story as an analogy to the strategic planning process, which is some of what we're going to find out, we know from community members, from everyone who participates, are things that make our school district what we want it to be, right? So we're not setting a frame of everything's new, throughout everything we're doing. It's actually, we better catalog that so we really feel like we know how passionate people are about certain things about our schools, our staff, our community. And that's the approach that, Dr. Masad's taken, that's the approach we're taking. So I think, to respond to your question, it's not trying to envision everything, it's really trying to understand how people are experiencing our schools now, and then to use that data to improve our schools moving forward.
So just very briefly, one comment that I just wanted to make is this timeline ends in May of 2018 with preparing and publishing the report of the strategic planning processes. And I would strongly encourage us to actually extend this timeline out by a few months to add in what the communication or the reflection back to the community, to the staff, will be of the strategic planning process, because the real, I think, harm comes in, we put all this work and energy into developing the strategic planning process, and then it's shown to school committee, it's shown to a handful of administrators, and then that's it, right? And so, and I think as much care and time as is being taken right now to really think through what the strategic planning process is, should also be put into that reflection out training of staff, and thinking through any pieces that will come out of that will result in changes, and even if there aren't any changes, right, reflecting back like, hey, this process that we've been doing has been working fantastic, let me tell you about it. And really, I think also paying attention to the way or the format by which we're reflecting back, so that it's not just another PowerPoint or, but, becoming, thinking about how it becomes maybe a set of materials that are handed to new staff, current staff, that it's, how we synthesize that information and it's shared with PGOs, for example, and how it's reflected back to, parents and guardians more broadly, so that they hear what our strategic planning process actually is, how that's getting turned and how it's being implemented across the board. That all of that will be really, really important, I think, moving forward. So, I would love to see this timeline actually extended to like probably November of 2018, right? Really, realistically speaking, I think in order to hit all those different pockets, that you want to make sure that you're taking your time and that you're sharing it out as broadly as possible.
Thank you.
Hope this is not inappropriate comment, but could you arrange to have the men's room door unlocked in the future?
Where did you end up going?
I did not.
That'll be my job. Yes.
Okay.
And I can walk out there if you need right now, so. I can.
Sorry. Don't be sorry.
It's just my master's here.
Yeah, okay, this is tiny, a little stupid. Well, two things. The first one is not stupid. Just that at CPAC, I mentioned that this process was going to be happening, and the question was, how does CPAC get involved? So glad to see this, and just would like to know what to report that they should expect in terms of connecting. Second is it DESI or ESSI? Is
Sure.
it changing? Because I read this and I was like, this is going to the community, and I think of DESI, so now here's another one, and there's BESI, and I just wanted to be really clear.
Sure, so for the first one, I met with the president of CPAC on this this
great.
and other topics yesterday.
Great.
So I think that one's covered. On the second one, technically it's ESSI. I don't understand why you would take the D out, because I don't know how you would actually say the acronym without saying the D, which is department. So, but I think they function synonymously, and I've had many, DESI is still the nomenclature that's used most frequently. On a technical sense, it is ESSI.
It is ESSI, okay.
Is there any problem with just changing it to DESI then?
Probably not.
I'm still saying DOE.
Yeah.
Every normal person who even knows these acronyms says DESI.
And that's
Then
different
why
than
should we-
Bessie?
Then why should we confuse them by making it?
And then the
Did you
federal
say making it
statute.
messy? I think that's true.
No, and the federal statute is ESSA. It's just,
know.
point well taken, I've got it.
Okay.
This goes back to Ms. Agonia's comment. This is a communication document.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
If there's any other feedback, it says the 30th, we're not going to get it out tomorrow, so if there's other feedback in the letter, if people could get it to me by the end of the week, would that be acceptable to the committee? Because we're planning to send it out next.
Yes,
Can-
of course, Ms.
I
Agoniz.
just,
Sir.
I think
Go ahead, Kate.
if you could bullet the, after the first set of bullets, if you can bullet the other ways that you're getting input. I think it's nice, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Because if some people read it quickly and you're like, oh, you're not doing in-person outreach, but you're doing that in that second program.
So I have a good news and bad news. The bad news is, because I wasn't wearing my glasses, I misread earlier, and the previous item was actually timed for 8:35, not 8:55, which means we're already 20 minutes behind. There is good news on the earth, and the good news is we're still only 20 minutes behind.
We got to get you to your birthday party.
Right here, baby. And so, but the point is that we're still only 20 minutes behind. So now, 2018, 2019 school calendar.
Yep, and I think we can make up time on this one. This is a first read. I'm not asking for a vote tonight, but I think it is important to describe the process just a little bit. So last year, I received some feedback from community members that they wondered if we could vote on the calendar earlier, because people make plans, all sorts of plans, and this is both from staff as well as parents, guardians. So I want to publicly thank the APEA because they're involved in this process. And last year we started a process where we actually have joint meetings before we actually come up with even a draft. Ms. Moland, who's not here, is heavily involved in that, as was Ms. Fay, who's the president, and Terry Ominsky, who's also involved in the APA. So this draft isn't radically different from the current year calendar, just I want to highlight the differences. So we moved the curriculum day, this year it's in March, we moved it back as it was last year to election day, being that it's on the even years, it tends to be more heavily, the elections, more people attend, or more people come to vote. And our 3 elementary schools in Amherst are election precinct, or election voting.
Polling stations.
Thank you, polling stations. And just everyone at the elementary level, I can speak from my own personal experience, was a lot more comfortable having kids not in school on days we have lots of unquarried people present. And so that is one change from this year to next year. Just the way Martin Luther King Day fell out, we just had to make adjustments in January with the middle school, high school exam schedule, but I think we did that reasonably well. Students may be excited, they almost get like a little bit of a mini break there, but there was just no way to break the semester in a way where it provided teachers time for the assessment and grading and report cards to go out without having a little bit different schedule, because essentially Martin Luther King Day is 6 days later than it is this year, just the way the calendar worked out when it's celebrated. And there's a little bit of new format, which Ms. Moreland did. Without color, it's slightly less cool, so I apologize that you're looking at the grayscale version instead of the color version. We tried to be more explicit in the bottom section about dismissal times on early releases and things like that. For those of you, one other change, for those of you who've followed this last couple of years, Good Friday has typically been a day off, not necessarily because of the religious component, but because it was just hard to get staff and students. Our attendance rate was so low, and it ended up being a really expensive day because we had so many subs in, we couldn't cover the buildings. It actually falls during break this year, so that's not an intentional decision to change. It actually is just, it's already a day off. I think other than that, there aren't other substantive changes to the calendar as compared to this year. So this is a first draft. I can take questions. The other relevant piece is this has already been shared to the staff by the APEA, and there was, we did a good job this year. I want to thank Ms. Fay and Ms. Moreland, who were critical. There was nothing but positive feedback we received, which doesn't always happen. We put out a calendar.
Other questions or comments? When does this come back?
So next meeting, the 12th, we'll take a vote, and then we'll communicate that out to the larger community before the new year, which was our goal. So thank you for that.
Okay. Do we have any gifts?
I do not believe there are gifts
I don't see
today.
any.
No.
Okay, school committee planning so one, we already talked about earlier that the CPAC item today is going to be moved to January 16th.
Yes.
And you have here a draft agenda for December 12th. If people have items that they still want, yes. So anyways, let me finish my thought.
Okay.
People still, it's being so responsive, he has his hands up, I don't know what to talk. If people have items that, I mean, I think we ought to do something, Mike, as well, is that we have sort of a running list for a couple meetings.
Yeah.
I think it'd probably be helpful to share that with the committee, just to make sure that they can see either A, we've missed an item, or that we haven't missed an item, but unfortunately the schedule's just jammed. And then I know you're happy, I'm happy to have a dialogue about whether we need to move something up because it's being unintentionally delayed more than we intended or would like. And obviously, if you have it up, you can answer a question if it's scheduled now.
Yeah, I do have, would you like me to read off what I have for the 16th of January? So I'm going to add the CPAC and special ed survey that was delivered
Right.
from tonight.
And actually, we need to add in a discussion of the SCTF goals and stuff, that topic.
Sure.
If it's not in there now, it needs to be.
Yep. And I have initial budget projection on the 16th of January, as well as update on trimester and semester, which was requested by a school committee member. So those are the 4 topics that I have on for the 16th,
Okay.
at least preliminarily.
So,
I-
yes, please. Go ahead.
I have an agenda item that I don't know, it's sort of sensitive, so I don't know whether to, and I talked to the superintendent before about it, and I don't know if I mentioned it to you, Eric, but, so it's regarding, sometimes when employees depart, or staff departs the district, sometimes there's these, what do they call that, the settlement agreements, and sometimes there's bans from future employment, just to protect the district from future liability or whatnot. And so I was wondering whether we could talk about one particular instance of that, to see if the district could take that part out, just to, so I don't know if that's an executive session discussion, or if we can do it openly, and, it probably would require legal, our counsel,
Okay.
Mark Terry.
Okay.
But, I just wanted to
Sure, appreciate that.
put that to the full body.
Sure. There are other points, Mr. Demling had his hand up earlier?
Yeah, 2 quick ones. You had mentioned the wisdom in trying to get the items sorted out in the superintendent evaluation of which members would contribute to the evaluation prior, as much as possible, before the election, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So a similar item to that is new members orientation.
Yes.
That we might want to
Get going on that.
Right. So it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but I didn't know organizationally whether, next meeting, whatever, tap a couple people to like draft something kind of up so that we can look at that earlier rather than later, so that it's not February and we're thinking about specific candidates. That was one thing. And the other thing is, I had a couple of students express some interest in being just talk to me informally about being a rep on the committee. I know we had talked about that, so I didn't know what kind of process you wanted to engage in.
We have a process for that? Seems like we ought to have a process.
Do they still meet?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. Do you want to, I don't know whether to respond to your question or Steve,
I think
Mr.
you can
Sullivan's.
incorporate his question
Okay.
into my question.
Sure.
Because either that group exists and it's part of a standing process, or we don't have a standing process, but the group was the process and doesn't
The group
exist
was
anymore. I mean, I'm just saying,
Right.
it's sort of the one question, really.
So, in my time attending these meetings, I've seen different methodologies. So one was what Mr. Sullivan said, there was a group and they sort of took turns-ish in participating. Other years we've had consistent membership from one individual. But I think the formal process is getting someone who's interested or a group of people who are interested and giving them an orientation and getting them involved. I don't think there's no like election or things like, or something
But is there
like that.
who's responsible for providing the nomination to the committee?
I don't know. I'm not confident in my response to that. But I think, given that we haven't had one for quite a while, if there are students who are interested, maybe we can follow up offline with you and Mr. Demling about
Yeah.
engaging those students, because I think if there's interested students, we should tap that resource.
Okay. I mean, I think I think that's great. I think it would also be advisable for us to reestablish some sort of standing process so that, for example, since students tend to depart or lose interest,
Yeah.
at the end of the year, it'd be nice if comes next September, we actually have a process where we say, hey, Principal Jackson, send out that blast, get your invites, tell the committee members to channel their nominees to X person, and then they will figure out and get to you, and then you'll get to us, and then we'll approve. Yes?
So that means another parent-student school committee pizza party. I'll in for that again. No, that's what when that group of high school students was meeting, they were meeting on a monthly basis, and there were actually a couple of school committee members who were able to attend the meetings during the day, and then on October of that year, we had their parents, they made it 10 students in the school committee. We just sat in round tables in the cafeteria and just ate pizza and talked.
That sounds really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in the process.
It sounds actually productive, too.
This is a request for a future agenda item.
Sure, yeah.
The status of the achievement gap at the regional school.
Conference update, we talked about that during our meeting earlier. I didn't hear you mention that, so.
I'm not really sure how to proceed with this, but we had done some talk about the protocols
Yeah.
a while ago, and I hadn't gotten very much feedback on that, and so I don't know if that's something to send out again and ask for feedback, or if you want me to just draft something final-ish for people to respond to, not like final, but just like a vision of what it could be without, it's a little messier right now because it's more inclusive of a lot of options. But,
You know what I would,
yeah.
I'm gonna wave my hand that direction in 2 seconds, but I think the idea, it's gonna sound funny actually, since I'm gonna wave my hand at Mr. Demling afterwards. I think the process of having someone take the bull by the horns if they're willing and draft something and then have the committee respond is actually a really great process. And especially when they do it with a level of both ambition and egolessness that Mr. Demling had, that he both worked his butt off on this thing, but then also wasn't really pissed when Phoebe and I jumped into the thing to help give our edits to it. That was really great, but also frankly it helped have something to respond to because it's easier to work through. So I actually don't think that's a bad idea. because I haven't heard any indication from anyone that they don't want to do protocols, so I wouldn't take this as an indication that people don't care about the work you're doing or care about the idea of getting them any more than we've done absolutely nothing about new member orientation. And I know there was like everyone wanted that to happen. So that's just something we haven't gotten to yet, but it's important. Shelley?
I was just going to mention, I thought we actually had it on a previous agenda to discuss the protocols, and it got tabled. Because
We did?
We went really late, and I was really interested in talking about it, so yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, see, there's some enthusiasm. That's what we're looking for. Thank you.
Okay.
Seriously, does anyone have any other feedbacks? I think that's actually a really good idea. And then we'll put it on another agenda.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Speak up.
Oh, let's see, well,
Yes? What is it?
no, I'm just thinking about, I'm not sure when this would come, but maybe, Mr., do we have it on there that the superintendent evaluation subcommittee would present in the bull by the horns type of approach, a protocol,
Do you want us to set an
protocols?
artificial deadline for you? I mean, we're
Yes.
going to do it in advance
Yes,
of...
yes, thank you,
Okay.
yes.
It's going to be on the 16th.
Okay,
that's
that's great,
good.
thank you.
Well, you know, it kind of has to be, right? Like, eventually, it's not even
It's
going to
gonna
be this year
happen,
anymore.
right, exactly.
So it's, you know. Good. Anyone else on this subject? I mean, by the way, thank you for your feedback and all your ideas, because this is the only way we can keep it going, but also, the spirit of the exercise for me is that we're always trying to include things you want to talk about, and the challenge is just scheduling it and working out the schedule and things. All right, anyone have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor? We are adjourned.
I was going to have extended discussion on that.